Okay, so for this next video lecture, so we'll be discussing about audit procedures in addressing significant risks. Okay, so when we say significant risk, this refers to an identified risk of material misstatement for which the assessment of inherent risk is close to the upper end of the spectrum of the inherent risk due to the degree to which inherent risk factors affect the combination of the likelihood of the misstatement to occur and the magnitude of the potential misstatement, okay, if it were to occur. So meaning, um, these are the risks that have been identified to be material, which is assessed in the inherent risk. And this is where the inherent risk factor is the combination of the misstatement that it is likely to occur, as well as the materiality or its magnitude is it will affect most likely the major part of the financial statements. Okay, so this is what we mean by significant risk. So as part of the risk assessment, the auditor here will determine and based on his professional judgment whether the assessed risk of material misstatement are significant or not. So here, the auditor will have some factors to consider, okay, in order for him to determine if that risk is significant or not. Okay, again, using his professional judgment. So, the risk of material misstatement that may be assessed as having higher inherent risk and may therefore be determined to be significant risk may arise from the following. Okay, first, if the transactions are for which there are multiple acceptable accounting treatments where subjectivity is involved, meaning in this case, um, there is a possibility of misstating or error, okay, in the treatment of a particular transaction because it has or it can be defined or interpreted in many forms, and it these definitions are acceptable. So meaning there is a possibility that it may be uh, or because of its subjectivity, okay, the management or the entity will have the uh, option on how to treat such transactions. However, if that is the case, then this type of transaction might be used for some uh, purpose which may benefit, okay, the interest of the management or anyone who is in control, okay, of such um, recording or in the internal control, okay, for that specific transaction. Okay, so because in this case, they are free to choose whatever treatment, okay, they will apply, okay, in accounting for such transactions. So therefore, there is a possibility that they might override, okay, in the application of those accounting treatment. Okay, so that is the first. Another is um, this can be uh, determined to be significant risk if the accounting principles that may be subject to differing interpretation. So in this case, there is a specific accounting principle, but the interpretation is different, for example, from the understanding of the entity, and when it comes to the auditor's interpretation, it becomes different. So here, because of that, again, there is a possibility of error or even fraud, okay, that may exist in the preparation for the accounting of the transactions under these accounting principles. Another is the accounting estimates. So we all know that accounting estimates are also subjective. So this might have high estimation uncertainty or even complex models, okay, that will be used in the determination of such estimates, which will give rise to errors again and will lead to misstatement in the FS. Okay. Another is the complexity in data collection and processing to support the account balances. So in this case, because of the complex process, okay, so again, there might be error as well in the preparation, in the documentation, the accounting, okay, and the treatment of such transactions. Okay, so in this case, the entity which prepares the FS will have some dilemma probably on how they will account it. So they will interpret it as how they understood it. Okay, so that's why. Another is account balances or quantitative disclosures that involve calculations that is complex. So this is the same with the previous case, okay, in which there are complexity in data collection as well. Another is changes in the entity's business that involve also in the change in accounting, such as mergers and acquisitions. So this is where two or more entities are joined or combined together to become one entity. So in this case, all the transactions of the combination, okay, will affect the present accounting and as well as the nature probably of the entity. So this will give room, okay, for some misstatements, especially in the FS. Okay, because in the combination there are certain rules and principles that they should follow. So they should be diligent enough, okay, in following such in the especially in the preparation of their FS. Another is when the auditor has determined that a significant risk exists. So here, when that is the case, then the auditor shall obtain an understanding of the entity's controls, including control activities which are relevant to the risk. So in this case, if there are significant risks, the auditor's response is to always go back, okay, to the entity's internal control to determine if it is strong or weak so that he will know whether to rely on those controls or to do more substantive procedures instead. Okay, when the auditor plans to rely on the controls over a risk, so here the auditor has determined to be a significant risk, the auditor shall test those controls in the current period. Okay, so in this case, what happens here is the auditor preliminarily has the plan, okay, to rely on the internal controls for the risk assessment. Okay, however, he determined that it is part of the significant risk or he may consider that the internal controls are weak or I mean to test if that internal control is weak or strong. So he will test those controls. Okay. And eventually, um, the first thing that the auditor will do is to first determine if the internal control is weak or strong. Okay. So that he will know if he will rely or not on those controls. So the auditor should also perform substantive procedures that are specifically responsive to such significant risks. Okay, so here, substantive procedures, as mentioned before in our previous video lecture, this cannot be eliminated. Okay, so this is specifically responsive for those significant risks so that the auditor can um, gather appropriate and sufficient audit evidence to support his opinion. Okay, so when only substantive procedures are performed, meaning in this case the internal control is weak. Okay, so the auditor will not rely on the internal control, so he will do more substantive procedures instead. So it should include tests of details, meaning he will or the auditor will conduct a test of details on the transactions, the account balance, and the disclosure. Okay, so those are for the audit procedures in assessing significant risk.